Hi, my name is Emma Comstock-Reed. I am an 8th grade math teacher, and this video is about how to facilitate which one doesn't belong with students. So this routine has been around for quite a while, and you may have done this routine many times with your students. This may be your first time doing this routine with your students, and my goal for today is to talk not only about this specific which one doesn't belong activity that's in Unit 7, Day 13 of Illustrative Math's 8th grade unit under Week 25 in the Teach Hub, but also to talk in general about how to do which one doesn't belong and what I've found successful in my own classroom when doing this routine. So I'm going to start with an example that I recently used in class, and this is a which one doesn't belong activity that I created. So if you are creating your own which one doesn't belong, my suggestion is that you try to keep as much the same as possible, except for what you want to highlight with students. So you can see that I used the digits 4, 3, and 5 in all of the options, and the only things that I changed up were the topics that we're talking about in class, which are the different operations that we can do with numbers in exponential form, the difference between positive and negative exponents, and the difference between the base and the exponent. So those are the only things I switched up when I created this. And then in terms of facilitating, I use Desmos, and you may be using Pear Deck, you may be using Google Slides in Google Classroom, you may be using Nearpod. Whatever platform that you're using for which one doesn't belong, I suggest that you use something that shows you easily what all of your students are thinking about this question. So part of why I use Desmos when I facilitate live instruction is because of the screen that makes it really easy for me to see what students were thinking. So I've made all of these students anonymous. The names that you'll see are names of famous mathematicians. So these are not my students' names, but so you can see in Desmos, it shows me how many students responded to each choice for which one doesn't belong. And so I'm not expecting one of these options to be more correct than others. I'm just looking for trends for my facilitation. So you may also be using Desmos, in which case this is what I suggest you do. Put it in the format of a multiple choice question. Some other options are to use Google Forms, and then you could see a similar spread. Otherwise, you can achieve the same effect by scanning through student responses, which will show up on most platforms that you're probably using, whether it's Pear Deck or Nearpod, etc. So as you're looking through, what I start with is the most common response. So you could see at the top for me, that was the one with the negative exponent and the one that shows division. So I'm looking for students that are using the math vocabulary I want to hear so that I can encourage them to share their thinking. Because you might have students who see that this is division, and you might have students that are just, incorrect in their thinking, like this student, or still seeing the fraction bar as just a fraction and not understanding the relationship between that symbol and division. And you want those students to be able to hear the ideas from students who know that that symbol is division, for example. So to summarize, in my classroom, when I design which one doesn't belong activities, I try to emphasize specifically the content that I'm teaching at that time, and make sure that there's something about each option that I want to discuss. Now I want to bring it back to illustrative math and how they suggest you go through the instructional routine of which one doesn't belong. So now I'm in Open Up Resources, which is where that illustrative math curriculum that we're using in Teach Hub. So this is Illustrative Math's guidance specifically for the warm-up in the rational bases lesson that we're focusing on now. So this first part that they state here really applies to any time you're doing which one doesn't belong, the second sentence where it says, it encourages students to explain their reasoning, hold mathematical conversations, and gives you the opportunity to hear how they use terminology and talk about characteristics. So in this case, in this lesson, we're looking at characteristics of expressions in comparison to one another. In any which one doesn't belong facilitation, that's your primary goal, is having students share in their own language why something stands out to them, and having students add on to one another so that some of that math vocabulary is coming not just from you as the teacher, but also from other students in the room. So it's really important that you keep that focus in your facilitation on student thinking, and when you give feedback about the warm-up, it should be related to how students are communicating with one another and them honing their skill in which one doesn't belong. The math skill you'll address in your lesson. This warm-up is really just to bring up and surface some words you're going to use in the lesson, give students an opportunity to hear about math ideas from other students. As students get better at doing which one doesn't belong, your goal is for them to just really clearly describe both what stands out and how the rest of the options share something in common that's different. So you don't want to ever make a student feel like they shouldn't share something if they don't have the specific math vocabulary to share it yet. What you want to do is encourage them to share in their own language and then layer that specific vocabulary on top of that. So one more suggestion from illustrative math is that you can use groups to have students discuss which one doesn't belong together. And the goal in that group would be to come up with a reason why each expression doesn't belong. And that's also a great next step for that student who very quickly comes up with a reason every day in the warm-up and is just done and waiting for you. You want to encourage them to say, okay, well now try to figure out a reason why each of these does not belong. And then on the other side, for students who have trouble getting started, you can always have that sentence stem of blank doesn't belong because blank. So finally, to bring this all back to the which one doesn't belong that is in the current lesson on rational bases, this is a really good example of having possible responses in your mind as you go into the facilitation of the routine for which one doesn't belong.